Make sure the region you want is selected. In my case, that's Northern Virginia, US East 1. Then click on Your VPCs on the left menu and click Create VPC up at the top. We're going to name this VPC Web-VPC, and we'll give it a CIDR block of 10.100/16. And do not assign an IPv6 CIDR block yet. We're going to tackle IPv6 later, but for now, we're just interested in IPv4. Go ahead and leave the tenancy set as default. Now, I know I said you don't usually want to go with the defaults, but in this case, the only other option is dedicated tenancy, which costs a lot more because your instances run on dedicated hardware. So let's stick with the default tenancy and click Yes, Create. Next, we'll create a public subnet to go in the Web VPC. Go to Subnets on the left and click Create Subnet. And for the name tag, we'll type web-pub. Select the VPC you just created, which is of course web-VPC. And for the availability zone, again, I always recommend selecting one explicitly because as you create more subnets, it's important to keep track of which subnets are in which zone. So let's select US East 1A. And now for the IPv4 CIDR block, we'll do 10.12540/24, and then finally hit Yes, Create. Next, we're going to create a new route table. Let's go to Route Tables on the left, click Create Route Table, and we'll name this one Web-Pub, and select the Web VPC, and then click Yes, Create. Now, make sure that the Web-Pub route table you just created is selected, and click the Routes tab. Now notice that there's only one route in here, 10.100/16, and the target is local. Local refers to the local VPC. Now this may seem like a strange, almost pointless route, but remember that the route table controls where traffic goes. IP routing is destination based, so effectively this route is saying any traffic destined for the 10.100/16 subnet should stay in this VPC. It should stay local as opposed to, say, trying to go over a VPN connection to a remote site. But I want you to notice something else here. We created a subnet with the prefix 10.12540/24, but there's no route for that prefix, is there? We just have one route for the 10.100/16 prefix. This assumes a hierarchy. It assumes that your subnets are going to literally be subnetworks of your VPC CIDR. This is different than a traditional network where you can come up with any crazy IP scheme you want. Here, Amazon enforces a hierarchy. That's something to keep in mind if you're considering moving on-premises servers to the cloud and you want to maintain your existing IP scheme. All right, next, let's click on the Subnet Associations tab. And notice it says you do not have any subnet associations. So let's click Edit, and then click the Associate box here, and then click Save. Now, what did we just do? Well, to give you an analogy to a traditional network, this is somewhat like plugging a router into your network and assigning it an IP address in a given subnet. In this case, by associating the subnet with the route table, we're causing AWS to assign the implied router an IP address of 10.125.4.1. It always gets that first address in the subnet. After we launch the web server instance, we're actually going to be able to ping the implied router on that address to see that it's actually there. Okay, next, let's create the Internet Gateway. Go over to Internet Gateways, click Create Internet Gateway, and we'll give this the name Web-IGW. Click Yes, Create. And once it's created, make sure it's selected in the list and then click Attach to VPC. Select the Web VPC and of course click Yes, Attach. Now to give you an analogy to a traditional network, this is like when your internet service provider places an internet router at your site. They configure it for their side and all you have to do is connect your network to it, which is like what we're going to do right now. Let's jump back over to Route Tables. Select the Web-Pub route table and click the Routes tab. Let's click Edit and then add another route. And in the destination, we're going to enter 0.0.0.0/0. Now, as I said earlier, IP routing is destination based, and this quad 0/0 IP prefix matches any address that is not explicitly in the route table. Next, tab over to the target field and notice that IGW- appears followed by a random string. This IGW identifier is the internet gateway that we just created. Let's go ahead and select that. Now the idea here is that if our web server tries to send a packet to an IP address out on the internet, for example, let's say it's 1.2.3.4, that destination will match the default route. And because the route table has the internet gateway as the target, it will forward the packet out via the internet gateway. And of course, it'll go out to the internet. Now, to continue the earlier analogy, creating a default route pointing to the internet gateway is kind of like connecting an ISP's internet router to your network. They've placed it there. That's what happened when we actually created the internet gateway. That's the ISP placing the router on your site, and then creating this default route is like us actually connecting their router to our network. All right, let's go ahead and click Save. And that is all we need to do to configure our public VPC.